Why overhead squats? Today we want to talk about why should you do overhead squats, why the overhead squat is a real head-to-toe exercise, and why you need to do overhead squats if you are an Olympic weightlifter or a Crossfitter. So why should you do overhead squats if you can do back squats or front squats? The answer is very simple. The overhead squat has some unique benefits that the back squat and the front squat simply don't have. And the biggest benefit is that it works proper squatting mechanics. What that means, you have the bar overhead and you need to stabilize the bar overhead while squatting. A slight deviation to the front or to the back will result in you losing the bar. So you have to focus on proper squatting technique and execution. With the front squat or back squat, there are always some compensation mechanisms. So with the front squat, you can always hold it a little bit with your arms if needed. The back squat allows you to lean further forward than you should. So the overhead squat simply does not allow that. The question is, what do we do with advanced athletes? Excuse me for the spelling mistake. What do we do with advanced athletes? Because the load in the overhead squat simply is not enough to stimulate anything. True, but as I said, it's a technique exercise. So we use it in the acquisition phase of technical learning, so when you start out, but also in the consolidation phase. So when you have acquired the technique, but you want to consolidate the technique. What that means is also for advanced athletes, we have the overhead squat in the program to manifest proper squatting technique, and that is mostly in the warm-ups. Another reason why you should do the overhead squats is because it's a real head-to-toe exercise. What that means is the weight is right over your head, so everything between the weight and the ground has to work. Not sure whether you are familiar with the joint-by-joint approach, but basically it just says that every joint in the body has a different function, so it's either made for mobility or stability, and that's pretty much resembled in the overhead squat as well. So if we start top down, so you need to have enough shoulder stability to hold the bar overhead. You need to have enough thoracic spine mobility to keep the body upright. One joint further down, the trunk, there needs to be enough stability to have the bar overhead and then transfer the forces from the ground to the bar overhead. The next joint is the hip joint, so enough mobility in the hip joint to go down. The next joint, the knees, made for stability. So also in the overhead squat, we have to work, the overhead squat works on the knee stability, and the last joint is the ankle, which is made for mobility, where again, if you don't have enough mobility in the ankles, you will see it in the overhead squat that you just can't get into the right position. So the overhead squat is one of the best head-to-toe exercises that is out there. And that is also the reason why the overhead squat is used in rehabilitation to assess the whole chain of movements from shoulder to ankle. And the last one, if you're an Olympic weightlifter or a Crossfitter, you simply have to do the overhead squat because it's part of your competition. An Olympic weightlifter, the catch and recovery phase of the snatch is essentially an overhead squat. CrossFit, I'm not too familiar with, but anyway, CrossFit also has the overhead squat as an element in their competition. So to round it up, the overhead squat is one of the best exercises to teach squatting mechanics. So not only back squats and front squats, the overhead squat can add value by teaching proper mechanics, which has a transfer to back squat technique as well as front squat technique. The overhead squat is a real head-to-toe exercise, which means every muscle or joint in the body between the bar, which is over your head, and the ground has to work. And the last one, if you happen to be a Crossfitter or an Olympic weightlifter, you just have to do the overhead squat because it's part of your competition.